Hi, we are group number 3, and we are here to discuss the benefits of heavy regulation on digital companies. First, let me give you an introduction or a background. Since the last few decades, there has been a technological revolution, and many companies have emerged and gained a huge importance in our everyday routine. The biggest digital companies in the world are Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And they have gained enormous market power over this sector, making the world question whether they have become a monopoly or not. Where are they considered a monopoly? Google is considered a monopoly in the search and digital service sector, while Facebook in the social media sector and Amazon in the online retailing one. According to Kimmelman in 2019, these companies are characterized by having strong economies of scale and economies of scope, caused by their low marginal cost and control of data. Also, they are characterized for having network effects. This means that people benefit from the number of consumers or providers in their service. There are huge barriers to entry, and we need to elaborate a regulation which allows new companies to enter the digital market so that it can expand and consumers can be benefited from this. This regulation needs to have in mind that we also need to regulate the access to the consumer's information to protect their well-being. Because if you think about it, most of these digital companies set price equal to 0, but they ask for your personal information and have you accepting terms and agreements that may be harmful for the consumers or for you. Additionally, some of these digital major companies manipulate the consumer's preferences by using their searches and liked post information. Until this day, there are not many countries that have regulated these digital companies. And the ones that have tried to implement antitrust regulations, that the same antitrust regulations that they have in their countries, have realized that it is not efficient because there are not clear rules of engagement and it is difficult to supervise the potential threats of the monopoly.
Hi. In terms of regulating big tech companies like Google or Amazon and the use of these companies of consumers' data, the European Union has taken the lead, establishing several laws and enforcing them with fines, while the US has not done nothing significantly in the past years, at least at the federal level. From the EU, we have the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the principal regulation of the EU relating to big techs and the use of its data. This regulation was agreed upon by the European Parliament in April of 2016, and in the spring of 2018 has become the primary law regulating how companies protect EU citizens' personal data. The regulation has as guiding principles requiring the consent of subjects for data processing, anonymizing collected data to protect privacy, providing data breach notifications, safely handling the transfer of data cross borders, requiring certain companies to appoint a data protection officer to oversee the GDPR compliance. Also, it's worth noting that if a company fails to achieve the GDPR compliance before the deadline that was imposed, it will be subject to stiff penalties and fines. And this is what happened to some big companies like Google or Amazon that had to pay big fines to the EU for not achieving the minimum requirements of the GDPR. Simply put, the GDPR mandates a baseline set of standards for companies that handle EU citizens' data to better safeguard the processing and movement of citizens' personal data. In the other parts of the Atlantic, in the United States, as we said earlier, nothing has been done substantially, at least at the federal level. But maybe this will change in the near future. Last year, on 2019, California has passed a law called Anti-Eavesdropping Act that will regulate companies like Amazon or Google, in which the new regulation requires the maker of ambient listening devices like smart speakers to receive consent from users before recording their voice. Also, in 1st of January of this year, tech giants had to comply with the California Consumer Privacy Act, aka the CCPA, that was passed in 2018 and requires business respond to consumer requests to delete their data and display how it is used. Business that fail to comply can face legal action or fines. As you can see, only the state of California in the entire United States has passed laws regulating these big tech giants like Amazon or Google. At the federal level, nothing has been done significantly. This difference in approach by the EU and the US can be explained by a strong belief in the market's ability to self-correct and the fear of false positives, cases in which a court incorrectly finds a firm's behavior to be unlawful, that have led US courts to develop legal doctrines that impose on plaintiffs a high burden of proof. These doctrines that limits the circumstances in which a monopolist's behavior can be found unlawful under US antitrust law. In contrast, the EU has historically had less confidence in the market's self-correcting mechanisms, and hence less concern with false positives. This has led the Court of Justice of the European Union, the chief judicial authority, to develop legal doctrines that permit enforcers to address a wide variety of practices, including those that would be considered perfectly legal in the US. The following table summarizes the similarities and difference between the two legal systems. What we can see is that firms face much greater scrutiny in the European Union than they do in the US.
And so here are some reasons to apply regulation on big tech companies. The first and most important is the constant growth in big tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook, which have caused them to become monopolies in different technological markets, such as social media, online retail of products. This includes streaming services and entertainment. Enterprise technology, which includes email, multilateral platforms, software, among others. This has generated that all types of companies and individuals becoming dependent of their services, not allowing other different services, for example, from minor firms, to have an important share in these markets. Another reason to apply regulation on big tech companies is that nowadays it is easier for minor companies with an innovative product to be absorbed by a big tech company rather than choosing autonomy and develop it by themselves, making an impact in the market. For example, Facebook absorbing WhatsApp and Instagram. Also, the sharing research and development in the big techs being much bigger than other companies makes innovation more limited for the minor firms in developing these products. Also, it is for the same reason that these companies have become what is known as a big tech. They are the ones that store and manage a huge amount of data, either from minor firms or individuals that make use of their products. This storage of information supposes a high risk, both from the users and the companies, as said by Mark Zuckerberg, creator and CEO of Facebook. Even though this means more freedom of information usage, the huge amount of data makes it pretty difficult to manage it all in the right way. And also, the recent cases of data mishandling have shown the dimensions of the reach and power the big techs have in the private information. On the other hand, another important reason is that the rise of these hugely profitable digital companies have minimized their overall tax payment to the government by setting up offices in low tax jurisdictions, for example, Amazon being located in Brazil, making them less overviewed by governments and having more freedom and power in many different markets around the world. That's why the OECD proposed a fair global tax rule, which will force large multinational companies to pay taxes even in countries where they do not have a physical presence, regulating them and benefiting all these countries and markets.
The Cambridge Analytica scandal. This is the biggest misuse of data known to date. This started back in 2013 when a researcher from Cambridge University developed a personality quiz app in Facebook that gathered information from the users that solved this quiz and also from their friends in this social network. This information was later recompiled by the company named Cambridge Analytica, that must be said had no relationship with the academic institution. The exact number of users that had their data misused is still unknown, but estimates from different sources tell that the number was close to 85 million users. Then, they managed to use this information and began a process of psychographics with the help of machine learning. This process, in some words, consists of assigning certain data points to each individual to create their psychological attributes. With this information, they managed to understand each user's behavior and use all this information to understand how they vote. They also use this information to target those individuals that were more persuadable. This company now had a very valuable asset that political campaigns will use in their benefit. By identifying those individuals that are more persuadable to change their votes, political campaigns could now personalize ads to those people for them to vote for a certain candidate or not vote for their opposition. They also use this information to strengthen their supporters with personalized ads. This practice is known as micro-targeting. This scandal took media attention during the 2016 US presidential campaigns when Ted Cruz paid over $5 million for the services of Cambridge Analytica. Later, in the same campaign, Donald Trump used this firm to target their supporters and potential voters. This affected the final results of the presidential campaign of 2016? The answer is still open to debate, but what is a fact is that they use private information to persuade voters by micro-targeting. Cambridge Analytica worked with several political campaigns aside of the 2016 US presidential election. Latest news revealed that this company had worked with 68 countries, being not only involved in political campaigns but also working directly with governments, intelligence agencies, and commercial companies in order to manipulate and influence people using their personal information. They also worked in the Brexit campaign and in the last campaign of Bogotá's mayor, Enrique Peñalosa. Our personal data is the most valuable asset that these big tech companies have. Even though Cambridge Analytica no longer exists, this data-driven business model represents a systemic and structural issue that must be addressed and requires a mix of political and regulatory solutions. So, what's the answer? As seen in class, these regulations are not an easy task, but stronger data protection provided by governments is certainly part of the answer. Governments all around the world should enforce Europe's General Data Protection Regulation
and use it as a model in their countries to mitigate the extent of data mining and micro-targeting. We must not forget that this type of regulations must be based in human rights, as it is the only way to reflect the extent that this industry has and how the illegal use of personal data is impacting our lives, to the point of restructuring what it means to be humans in the 21st century.
In conclusion, regulation must be implemented in the big tech companies with much more rigor from the government and the international organizations like the OECD. All of this because it creates a greater competitiveness among the firms that encourages more and more innovation and can give us, the consumers, a greater variety of services. Also, with heavy regulations, governments can control the data usage that these companies have, preventing cases like Cambridge Analytics and ultimately benefiting the whole society.